This is so bad. Okay, I'll just
Hey,
make my gesture into a circle thing.
hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Ian Douglas. I'm the author of this website, Tech Interview Guide. Welcome to the stream. Let's go over to this screen here. We got Tiff Bites with us. We got Tiffany Jachja with us, hanging out, and she's having some camera problems. This is not on purpose. The color coordination of the purple and the pink, not on purpose. But hey, Tiffany, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Um, we'll figure out the camera here at
We'll,
some point, I'm
we'll figure
sure.
it
But
out.
no big
Yeah,
deal. No big deal. It wouldn't be a tech stream if there wasn't some little glitch going on, right?
some little glitch. Yeah.
Good times. Cool. Well, appreciate you hanging out with us. We're gonna go through a whole bunch of resume reviews tonight. Greg Flaherty, thanks for the follow, and Ariel Paris, thanks for the follow. I'll give you all some blinky lights and some sort of greeting or audio sample of some sort. Um, Cool. Well, Tiffany, why don't you bring us up to speed on who you are? So you're a streamer here on Twitch. You go by Tiff Bites, but give us some background on who you are. How'd you get into tech? What do you currently do? All that fun stuff.
Yeah, nice. Well, hi everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, Ian, for welcoming me in. My name is
For sure.
Tiffany Jachja. I am currently an engineering manager at a media company, and I lead a data science product team. So I do quite a bit of engineering management, but also product and project management for the team at the moment. I've been in tech for a couple of years now. I got into it as through like formal education. So my bachelor's degree is in computer engineering, and my master's degree is in computer science. So
Wow.
I have a pretty
Awesome.
formal, traditional background in tech. But yeah, before being an engineering manager, I've done different things like software engineering, hardware engineering, DevOps, research, variety of things. So I will try to help you all out as best I can in the areas that I have specialization in. So if you ever want to know anything specific about any of the areas that I've worked in, feel free to ask. I'm happy to be a resource for you all.
That's awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I actually studied computer engineering myself. I love kind of the low level, like really get in and like tweak those bytes and controlling hardware and stuff like that. And then like 20 years later with the whole Internet of Things thing taking off and actually building circuits that are now controllable in a much easier way than writing C in assembly back in the day.
Oh yeah,
It's been pretty fantastic for sure.
gotta
So
love computer systems.
yeah. Awesome. Well, tonight Tiffany has agreed to be on the stream to help us out with a bunch of resume reviews. So I really appreciate everybody that sent in resumes. We're going to try to get through about half a dozen of them tonight. If we get through all those, I can pull up some extra ones. But I think we're going to start with about six. We're going to aim for about an hour and a half on the stream, and then we're going to raid over to Tiffany's channel. So once we wrap up here, we'll let Tiffany go, and then we'll hang out for a minute because I want to talk about the 1K follower giveaway. We hit 1,000 this week, so we got 1,000 followers here on Twitch. Pretty stoked about that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the logistics of that, and we'll probably do that giveaway next Thursday. And then Tiffany's camera will be back. Don't worry. She's trying to fix things on her end there. And
Yeah,
so we're going to talk through those logistics a little bit. And then once Tiffany's stream is up and running, we're going to raid over into Tiffany's channel. And we'll spend some time over in her community over there. So looking forward to that. So thanks for everybody dropping by. Master Firewall's already giving you shout outs saying you got a super great stream. I've hung out on the stream quite a bit, and it's a lot of fun just watching Tiffany do other resume reviews and just helping people with advice, but also just the variety of like gaming and things like that. And Tiffany, what's the name of that obstacle course game where you run around? And it reminds me of like the Despicable Me Minions, where you're like running through this obstacle course and you get batted all over the place. What's that one called?
oh yeah, that one's called Fall Guys, and
Fall
it's really
Guys.
great.
Yeah, it looks like a super fun
Yeah.
game. Um, awesome, cool. Dual Links Alpha, good to see you in chat. Thanks for the first time chat there as well. Sweet. Shall we dive into it? Shall we just
Yeah, let's
jump
go.
right in? All right, cool. I'm gonna switch over to this screen over here, and appreciate all the new follows as well. Cool. Well, we're gonna start with anonymous resume number one. So appreciate everybody sending in some anonymous resumes here. Let me go pull up my notes. Got them in another tab somewhere, I thought. Perhaps not. I will go pull up the notes.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'll just probably pull up my webcam, and that's how we'll do
yeah,
this.
Yeah, no worries. Be Gross Design, thanks for the follow as well. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Just going to pull up some notes over here, and then we're going to get started on a handful of resume reviews. Um, Tiffany started tweeting out about doing these resume reviews and how she was like busting out the red pen and like drawing all over the resumes in a virtual way, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. So one of the things that I talk about quite a bit on the stream is, I do obviously a lot of resume reviews and cover letter reviews and LinkedIn reviews and even job post reviews, which are super fun. I love trashing job reviews or job posts. But one thing that I say on the stream a lot is don't ever just listen to my advice. You have to listen to multiple people's advice around what makes a good resume, how to do interviewing, because what I look for as an engineering manager is going to be different from what Tiffany looks for as an engineering manager. And so tonight we may not agree on certain things, and that's okay. I think it's educational still for all of you to hear about what we each think about resumes. Like, should this go here? Should this format do this? How should we reword this bullet point? And things like that. I think it's really important to hear lots of opinions and lots of ideas. I usually say opinions are like armpits. Everybody's got a couple. Some of them stink. But tonight you're gonna get double the fun. We're gonna get double the input on these resumes. So appreciate everybody that sent those in. And if we don't get to your resume tonight, don't worry. We're gonna have a lot more resume reviews coming up. I've got other folks coming on the stream. We've got just about every Sunday booked through like mid-September to have guests on the stream, and occasional Thursday nights as well. So I'm looking forward to having a really diverse group of folks hanging out with us on the stream, and we'll go through those. Uh, Consumed Fever says job posters very lame and generic. I agree, and that's why I love roasting them. So some of them aren't so bad, but I actually got to write a job post for work this week, so I was pretty excited. I was like, let's do this right. So I was pretty excited about that. All right, so let me go get my notes for anonymous resume number one. And basically, what we're doing here is we're going to look at the submitted notes for folks that sent in a resume. And if you're still hoping to get a resume, I pasted the link down below in chat. You can go over to techinterview.guide and look for the link on there that says resume review, and you can send it over. I'll do them for free on the stream. If you want a private resume review, I do charge $50, but that $50 goes into a diversity in tech fundraiser, and I match all the money in that fundraiser. We just gave away $3,500 to a group in California, in San Francisco, called
Oh,
Hack the Hood. And my employer is going to match another 1,500 on top of that, so we gave him $5,000, and we basically came back late June. We reset all the counters, and we're going to raise again for the second half of the year, and then we're going to give that money to another organization to help with diversity in tech. So we're super excited about that. So please know that that $50 is not going in my pocket. Any bits, any subs, anything like that going on the stream, I'm going to match 100% of those funds, and that's all going into a fundraiser. So appreciate any help in that effort as well. B Gross Design says agreed. Salary ranges in a job post would be amazing. Save a lot of time if it's not in your acceptable range. It's law now in Colorado, and in California, I've heard is pushing for that law as well. That they're going to
New
be
York
pushing
too.
for salary range, and I think that's going to be the game changer. If California passes that law, everyone will start doing it, because they're not going to want to exclude California residents from those tech jobs for sure. Alrighty, so this first resume that we got was just submitted with a very generic note saying, providing a resume for the resume reviews. It's an anonymized one that I use to apply to my current job. So this is a resume that got somebody a job. So Tiffany, let's go through and let's see what we like and don't like about this resume. What are your first impressions here if I zoom out and we kind of look at it from like, an overall like format point of view and how they've used kind of the space on the page and so on?
Yeah, it was nice. I think from like a print preview, if you were to put this in print mode or pull it up on an iPad, it's very nice because it fits all on one page. I think it's a little bit wonky on there, but I think if you go into view under Google Docs and then put it in print mode, you'll be able to see what it looks like actually printed out, and it actually looks really nice. The one thing that I may kind of caveat here is that some of the bold is overused in some places, but generally, like the work experience is bolded out. The skills are listed out in a comma separated format, which is pretty nice because you don't take up too much space in your resume. So everything, all the different sections are there and labeled. So that's really helpful too. I think it's labeled software engineer, but it should be labeled skills. But,
Yeah, you know what? I just realized the formatting didn't come through. It actually imported all the PDFs into Google Doc mode
oh,
instead of actually opening the PDF. So let me change course on this. Let me actually open the PDFs so we'll actually get a better view of what these look like. So bear with
Yeah.
me for a moment while I pull those up because the formatting looks a lot better on that one. So let me go find those.
Yeah, and I think that happens sometimes where, if you all are building your resumes out in docs and then you're exporting it in PDF, make sure when you're previewing it and whatnot that you like what it looks like. When you bring it back into docs, it gets all wonky because PDF to docs conversion and file things.
Yep. All right. So we'll pull that into here. This is what it's oops. This is what it's supposed to look like. There we go. So that's a little bit better from a formatting point of view. I do agree there's a lot of bold going on right here, though.
It's a little top heavy in that
Yeah.
sense.
So we'll close that up and we'll zoom in a little bit here. So yeah, there's a fair bit of bold. Um, cool. So what do you think about like the skills block at the top, followed by education, and then getting into their work experience from there?
I would actually really like to see the education further down, because
Okay.
there wasn't too much here that what really stood out, and I don't think that this person was applying to their first job, and so it would have been nice to see like work experience further up right after skills, because that tells the story with a lot more flow. It would also be nice if the education section was a little bit formatted better, so like that second line in the education section doesn't have to be bolded. You can kind of just format that nicely.
Mhm.
And then if you want to, you can also remove the year of education. That's helpful if you want to do that, but kind of just make that neater.
Yeah, I think they could probably collapse all this into one line, to be honest. The city and state of where they went to school is probably not as important unless they have multiple campuses and one campus is known to be better than others. I would probably just lose the city state, and I would probably put the date over here on the right margin so all of your dates are kind of formatted the same way. Over here, you're spelling out the word May, but over here, you're using single digit numbers for the month. So just looking at consistency, things like that, I think would stand out.
Yeah. And then the skills section could have used some reordering, because this person probably applied for a software engineering role. That's why they have the word software engineer at the top, but they started with hardware skills. And
Mhm.
that was a little bit confusing to me. They also graded their level of proficiency in the different technologies, which is okay to know for yourself. But I think if you're going to be applying for roles, you know what you're going to want to work, what tools you want to use, and what technology. You have some favors for certain tools and certain skill sets, and you want to be able to highlight or showcase what those are immediately. So, if this person put expert in C, C++, C sharp, well, they should probably combine these little sections and then just put C, C++, and C sharp at the front. And that way, when you're applying for roles, people know generally what tech stack you work in and what expertise you have. So that's one way to just sort of put your best foot forward quickly and strongly, and then the other bits come after that. So like this person does a lot of coding in Visual Studio, they've used Eclipse, right? They also know CMake. That's cool. Like, let's reorder those, make sure you're sharing that, but put
Yeah.
it further down.
For me as an engineering manager, those programming languages are more important than the tooling that you use. And personally, I don't care what necessarily like what editor you use. So I tend to tell people like don't put VS Code and Atom and things like that on there. Like if there's like a highly specific tool that you have to use to get the job done, then yeah, put that on there. Like if you're into data science and you want to put Tableau on there, then by all means. But I think that telling me what editor you use is less important. But yeah, I would like to see the programming languages up top. And yeah, these labels are pretty subjective as far as like how you consider yourself to be an expert or proficient, because you might think you're an expert, and maybe through the interview process we find that you're not, and now it kind of puts more things into question. I think from that resume point of view.
Yeah, and sometimes you can go pretty tit for tat on the job description. Like if they say Visual Studio Code, put it there, But yeah, you could also replace a lot of the IDEs with other skills that you may have. So if you have experience in Git, that's a popular one that would showcase like, yeah, that's what version control is standard for you in your workflow, right? Like you know how to
Mhm.
do that. And so that's also a better way to show breadth in case you do want to show breadth in that sense. So you're taking up the same amount of space, but just being more effective with it.
Mhm. Yep, good. All right, well, let's work our way down. So it looks like they've had several roles at this company. So Tiffany, for someone who's had like a number of roles, plus an acquisition, how would you prefer to see that sort of played out on the page?
Yeah. So if your company was acquired by another company, this really depends on what you're trying to showcase. Like if you were this person's like initial company was acquired by another company, and then they had two different roles, and that's fine. What you typically do in most people tend to do is they'll have the company, they'll have the role, the company name, and then some bulleted points of the work that they did while they were serving as a software engineer. So what I usually like to see is if you're an associate software engineer, you had certain responsibilities and you accomplished certain things. Showcase those things, and then showcase what you did as a software engineer at the next level. So what you're doing is you're showing career trajectory. Showcase the features that you built, your main focus as an associate software engineer, and then showcase how you grew from that as a software engineer and how you're growing, if you're doing any tech lead or more feature work, or you're owning more parts of the system. So that's what I typically like to do. If your last company was acquired by, there's another company that got acquired and you were doing some stuff, you can also showcase differing parts. You can kind of be smart about how you lay things out. So, like, at a certain company you had a certain scope of influence. Did that grow? Did that change at the newer company? If it did, you can showcase that, right? And sometimes it's a little bit confusing when you have associate engineer one, all these different kinds of titles. If you're a software engineer, you're a software engineer. So you can take liberties with that. If you contributed certain works, or you accomplished something at a certain level, just say what title or what role did you serve those things
Mm,
in.
awesome.
This person has a lot of work that they did. Like you can tell that they did a lot just by the rest of the resume. But I want to see what role did you function in each of those, when you were doing these tasks.
Right. Yeah, it would be good to see kind of a breakdown of like, I did these at this in this role. I did had these extra responsibilities at this role, or like see what that progression is. Because right now, all we see is a snapshot of like the whole picture. So yeah, I agree. Seeing a little bit more of that breakdown might be helpful to a manager.
Yeah, and if it helps, if it helps, you can say that associate software engineer. If there was really no difference and there was just a title change, then I would try to have all of the core software engineering work, like your back end development work, sit right under that software engineering title. And then as you were doing DevOps or infrastructure work, have that sit under another title, and that can showcase breadth as well if
Mhm.
that's what you're going for. But again, it depends on what you're applying for, and that sort of thing. You can just kind of add more
Yeah.
structure or organization to the sections.
Yeah. What stood out to me is, they started out software engineer one and then went to associate software engineer. Some people, you know, they might miss the one and they might look and go, "Oh, you went from a software engineer to associate software engineer," to like, did you get downgraded as part of that acquisition? And some companies do level people a little bit differently. I might just call myself like software engineer. Like just say like I was a software engineer and I worked from, June 2015 through April 2020, because this basically went the whole time that you were here, and just collapse all that down and just say I was an engineer from this date to this date, and you can specify that you worked at this company, and you can actually mention maybe in a bullet point that there was an acquisition from the original company that you started at or something like that. But I think that would be a good way to kind of collapse all that into a single line. Just say I was an engineer from this date to this date, and just put the total start date and end date. So from like June 2015 all the way through April 2020, and just put a single job title on there. What do you think, Tiffany? Does that misrepresent what happened in there without, thinking about that progression of skill? What do you think there?
It's hard to tell like what this person actually did at their first initial company from 2015 to 2017. If they did a lot of work, I would not condense. I would try not to bundle it together. One thing that did come to mind was, at the current company that you're at, you can even just say that you're a software engineer and condense it that way. So 2017 to 2020, right? That's what
Yeah.
you were doing, all this stuff, so on and so forth. and then you can break it up by projects or anything else that you did. You can break it down by discipline if you wanted to. So that's something that comes to mind.
Yep. Consume Fever says in chat, coming from outside the tech, the titles feel meaningless, but the descriptions can mean a lot. I agree. So just like someone called themselves an expert or proficient at a particular thing, seeing level 1, level 2, level 8, like what do those levels even mean? Like just call yourself a software engineer. Now some companies it is important to actually represent yourself. Like FANG companies, they'll say like L2 or L5, and those have significant meanings at larger companies. And so I would say if these are larger companies, then having software engineer one as the actual title, I think is fine. But I think just calling yourself a software engineer, overall, and you could even take the C++ out of there because you're actually listing, C as your primary skill. Like when we read these lists, we would look at this from left to right and go, C better than C++, and C++ better than Python and TypeScript. And so to me, this kind of looks like you're a C developer who also knows C++, but you're calling yourself a C++ engineer. So those kinds of things stand out to me as an engineering manager of like, what order should these things actually be in? Like, how well do you actually know these things? But doing a lot of really low level kind of stuff, it looks like a lot of microservices, a lot of Kubernetes, um, some architecture work, some scalability, stuff like that, and maintaining REST services for the operations team. So looks like dabbling into a little bit on the DevOps side of things in here as well.
Yeah.
How do you feel about bullet points? Are they good size? Too long? Too short? Do you like to see more description, less description? How would you typically lay these out, Tiffany?
Yeah, I would try to keep them as consistent as possible. So here they make a little description about what they owned, but it doesn't follow the same pattern as the other bullet points where you have a strong verb. So created the architecture, participated in, and then you have the second to last bullet point there that says in-depth triage and investigation. I would try to keep it as consistent as possible. And usually what I like to do is I pick a strong verb, what you did, what was its impact, and then what skills did you use
Mm-hmm.
in order to make that happen. So that's pretty nice because then you don't have to have this first line where you say back end and you have the skills. It's already built into your bullet points, like exactly how did you use these skills and what did you do in order to make something happen. And that's the thing, is like we want to see how you've contributed at the role that you're in now or at the company that you're in or were in, to be able to get a good sense of how do you do work, or what skills do you have, and that you can bring to the workplace if you were to, if a hiring manager were to extend an offer.
Yep, I agree. It's a lot of showing that impact because when I'm reading this as a hiring manager, I'm like, oh, I want you to do this here too. Like, look at this thing that you did and that impact that it had. I want you to come here and do that. That's where you really need to entice us with those action verbs, but also more crucially, I think just showing the impact of like, what was the impact of this? By building out this architecture and putting this into like scalable containers and so on, like what was the impact of that? Were your deployments 20% faster? Was the onboarding of your development team, like several days shorter than it was in the past because there was less work to actually get up and running? They just download all the containers and boom, they're up and running. Like, tell us that kind of impact because bigger companies are going to care about how you're contributing to the team and they want to know that you're going to bring those contributions to their team as well.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because the better you are at articulating that, through a resume, the more likely you're going to get a call back because that person, a hiring manager will know that you understand the value of the work that you do, and then that you're also able to articulate and communicate about those things effectively. And sometimes that's what is required in order to make change or to get a project to become successful. And so sometimes, like even before you're accepted into an interview, or you get moved on to the next phase, an engineering manager or a hiring manager will know how good the interview is going to be ahead of time.
For sure. Raven's Creations asked in chat, does saying on your resume that your name is on a patent important to a hiring manager? I would say yeah, because you're definitely showing the impact that you had. Like you were able to invent something to the point of getting it patented for the company. That actually, really helps the company out in that sense. So yeah, I would definitely put that on a resume.
Also, if it gets into non-competes or anything else, it's important to disclose early on.
That's good to know. Yep. All right, well, let's move on to the second block of this. So it looks like they're kind of laying out all the different things that happen in here. They've got a little bit of extra like sort of gap in between the sections here between backend and infrastructure. But this is where they're getting into like the infrastructure that they did and then company hackathons. So there's a lot of repetition in here too, where they're like calling out the same skills over and over again. I would probably just have a single skills block, or I would just put all these skills up in the very top. Like you're calling out a lot of extra libraries and a lot of extra tools that you don't actually talk about up here at the very top in your skills block. Like you don't mention Kubernetes up here, and yet you mention it several times down here. Um, you mentioned JavaScript and TypeScript and Java and Go and so on, but you don't mention Bitbucket or Jenkins, things like that. So I think filling out your skills block up here I think would be a little more important. There's also some skills down here that like I wouldn't put Firefox on a browser. I don't care what browser you use. Um, if there was something really specific that you hacked on Firefox specifically, then tell me that in a bullet point. But otherwise, I don't care what platform you were on or what browser you use. That kind of stuff is not really relevant. But if you're programming specifically for Windows or you're programming specifically for Linux, then that's something I think that you could tell me in these bullet points, and not so much like what platform you use to actually develop it. Most hiring managers aren't going to care about that. But yeah, a lot of extra things in here where you're talking about like Ruby and Rust that you don't mention up top in your skills block. So if you know them well enough to put them in a bullet point, as a hiring manager, I look at that and go, okay, well, that tells me that you're sort of like exposed to that technical or that technology, but that you can't speak to it well enough to actually interview about it. Anything in your skills block, I would imagine you know that well enough to actually speak to it. And so the reason that I mentioned like move some of the stuff into that skills block at the top is because you mention it so many times in here. TypeScript is up top, but Kubernetes, you mentioned that on here a whole bunch of times, but Kubernetes isn't up here as one of your skills. So if you've used it a bunch, that tells me you should be able to speak to it as far as interview questions go.
Yeah. I think the bullet points devolve further because there was some work that this person did to transition monorepos for different languages, and that's why they included Go, Ruby, Rust,
Could
right?
be, yeah,
But you start to build these bullet points, and then you're putting a bunch of skills at the end of your bullet points, and you're putting them in parentheses, and it's hard to really understand or get quickly a good sense of like what you did and what technologies you use to do it. And that's why I really like the structure of like picking a strong verb, what did you do, and then what skills did you use in order to make that impact, right? So just be really careful about that, right? Because then you participated in a company hackathon here, and then you said voice assistant control, but that didn't really mean anything. So you just want to continue to make sure you're picking the right verbs, and then um, sharing what technologies you use in order to
mm-hmm.
make this happen. One
Cool.
other thing that was interesting from like a infrastructure or like a DevOps standpoint, right, is you did a lot of really great work. Like you created new deployment scripts, you extended, like you changed repositories, you became a code owner. I don't know what that means, but you created a code generator for a JSON schema. And these are really important things. So you want to be careful about like that first initial verb or the first half of that bullet point, because it doesn't actually showcase all the impact that you actually had. That first sentence that you wrote about creating new deployment scripts, that's really important. Like you essentially modernized and migrated a ton of services across the org. Okay, so you want to be able, when you come into interviews, you want to showcase the full breadth and the full extent of your impact that you had while you were doing this work. Because I don't think that you had a big team in order to do this. If you're a if you were called the software engineer and you were doing this and you became the co-owner, I don't suspect that you had a really big team or a lot of people to hide behind when you were doing this work. So I think that this actually required a lot of effort, and if you want to showcase that in these bullet points, and I don't think it's quite easy to miss, is what I want to say about it. Is like not everyone's going to catch like the full depth of what you did in this space.
Yep, awesome. All right, cool. And then down at the bottom, they've got projects, and they've got like a GitHub link down here at the bottom. I'd probably put the GitHub up at the very top with all of your other contact information, where you've got your phone number, your email, and your LinkedIn. I would probably throw GitHub on there. US citizen is good to know at the top if you are going to a company that may want things like secret clearance, like top secret clearance, and things like that. Otherwise, specifying that you're a U.S. citizen may not be important to a company, but it depends a little bit. And then for the projects down here at the bottom, me personally, I think once you build up enough professional experience, you don't really need to put projects on here unless you're exploring another technology where you want to get a job in that other technology. So for example, you've got like a couple of projects in C#. So if you're going to apply for a job in C#, then having the projects here in C# I think would be good, but you would want to probably put those projects above your work experience so that it stands out a little bit more that I know how to work in C#, instead of like burying it down here at the very bottom of the page. Now, if you're not going for a C# job, then whether you list projects on here or not, I think you've got enough work experience now because you've been in the industry. This covered a span of about 5 years. I think almost 6 years, I think, by the time you go end to end on this. So you've got a lot of work experience. I think you could probably take the project section off at this point. Typically projects would be on there for like new grads or people that are still new enough in their career that they don't have a lot of bullet points, they don't have a lot of jobs, and they need to fill it up with something. And so I would want to see some project work on there, like how you've used these skills that you claim to know. But I think you're deep enough into your career that you probably don't need the project section on here, unless there's something really super relevant to my company that you need to show me. And again, if that's the case, it needs to be way more prominent up top than buried down here at the bottom.
Yeah, and you also have quite a bit of bullet points for each of the sections, the work experience sections that you have. If you really think about what you want to have here, you can actually save up to 6 or 7 lines in this resume, and those lines you can use to be able to showcase your projects if you needed to. The reason why I say 6 or 7 is because you're going to condense the education section, you're going to remove 1 or 2 bullet points from the back end section, and then one from infrastructure, and then possibly rejigger how you did the company hackathon description, and then that's essentially 6 or 7 lines, and
Yeah.
that's enough for you to be able to go in depth on how you contributed to a project, just like you contributed to your work experience as a software engineer, whatever role you're in. And I think that speaks a lot more than just having a project section where it's essentially comma separated out like that. I don't really like seeing sections like that because it doesn't really speak to your impact or how you use certain technologies, other than the fact that you use them. And so I don't get a good sense of the scope of the project and its effectiveness and why you even created it, right? You want to make sure that it takes up space if it's going to be on your resume, and that it actually makes the impact that you want to have. It's like Ian was saying, if you explored a new technology, maybe you got into open source, for example, like that's something that's really going to add to your profile. Okay, now like buckle down into that, commit to that, and then build out the bullet points that belong to that project. So that's my recommendation around projects, friends. Like if you have anything that you can showcase publicly, link to it, give it the full space that it needs to have.
Yep, for sure. And I commonly give feedback on here all the time of you only want stuff on the resume that's really highly relevant to that company. So if you've got multiple projects, like this person's got a lot of different projects, like 3 or 4 or maybe 5 different projects, probably not all of them are going to be as relevant to a particular company where you're applying. So if you've got like one really prominent project, like, let's say this first one that you did in C#, is exactly in line with what my business does, forget the rest. I don't care about the rest. Just tell me all about this one because that one's going to be important to my company. So as you're researching companies and finding out what's important to them, you're going to find the skills, you're going to find the bullet points, you're going to find the projects and all the technologies that are important to them. And that's what you want to highlight on a resume. And so the common advice I give is build a big resume. Every skill, every project, lots of bullet points about your projects, lots of bullet points about your work, and so on. It's going to be way more than a page. That's okay. When you go to apply for the job, you're going to trim out everything that company doesn't care about. and you're going to get it back down to one page, and now you've got a customized resume for them by taking away all the stuff that they don't care about. So like if the company, like if you're applying to my company and my company doesn't do TypeScript, then it's okay to see it on there, but I don't get value in the fact that you know TypeScript if my company doesn't do TypeScript. If we do in the future, then great. I know I've got someone on my team that can do it. But if we don't actively do it, or we don't actively do Go or Rust, take that stuff off the resume. It's not important to me. If I'm like a C++ Python shop, that needs to be really prominent on your resume. Show me all the projects, show me all the bullet points where you use those technologies and had a big impact using those technologies, because that's important to my company. That's what's going to make that resume stand out to me.
Yeah,
Cool. All right.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. It really helps to do that, especially if you know you're gonna transition as well. Like if you have certain skills and then you had to bridge them through projects, um, through other other skill sets, maybe certifications, education, whatever it is. Sometimes you kind of have to you have to be smart about what you showcase on that resume, because if you do have 5 years of work experience, that's a lot of experience, right? Like you're going to take some parts of that with you in your next role, but not all of it is going to be relevant to know. And so for people who submit these really long resumes where it's kind of like a catch-all of all the things that they've done and it's really great stuff, it just showcases that they don't quite understand the role. And that's also important too, because if I'm hiring you for a particular role, I want to oversell that role. I don't want to make fake promises. I don't want you to come in and think you're going to do everything when maybe that's not the expectation for the role itself or for the team itself, right? So that's why it's also important to tailor fit some of the pieces of that.
Yep, for sure. Awesome, cool. Well, that's number one out of the way, and we are hanging out tonight with Tiffany. Go give Tiffany a follow. I pasted her Twitch link down below. We're going to go right over into her channel later once we're wrapping up with some of these resume reviews, and we're just getting some additional context and ideas about what makes a good tech resume. So we're going to go look at resume number 2. So let's go pull up the notes for number 2. Number 2 actually had a handful of notes. And the person that submitted this said, I'm a full stack developer with 2 years of experience. Software engineering is a career pivot for me as I have a bachelor's in athletic training and was working on my doctorate of physical therapy before making the transition into tech. There are 2 things I'd like to communicate clearer, but I'm not sure how. 1, my first experience, I was a contractor at the place I currently work now as a full-time engineer. Sometimes recruiters are confused by this. And secondly, at my current role, I got promoted from associate to mid-level engineer. Any thoughts on how to communicate these things better? Cool. Let's take another look. I like to kind of take that zoomed out sort of look. So to me, the first thing I spot is like this big gaping hole down here in the bottom right corner. If you've got other dates pushed up against that right margin, then push all your dates over onto that right margin. It'll make it look less like sort of clumped over on the one side where everything else gets kind of stretched out across the page. That would be my first impression there. Tiffany, any thoughts on overall layout, just from that sort of zoomed out kind of point of view?
I think it's good. I quite like I quite like it. It is shorter on the bottom. Usually, if you have that trouble of it being short on the bottom, what you can do is you can have a sidebar with your skills and your education, and then your experience can take up more space, and then you can put projects down, and that's kind of like a nice way to organize it. That's just one suggestion. But yeah, it is a little bit short on the bottom, but that's perfectly fine. It doesn't deter from anything. Like it's not a bad thing particularly, and especially if your experience section tells a really great story, most people don't even look further down. So you can also approach it from the perspective of, well, I have everything that I need and I told the really great story, and you should be good with that. So that's totally fine. We typically, when we focus in, we kind of just, if you have this on your iPad and I have mine on the iPad, you just kind of, what you do is you put it in print mode and then you grab it at the middle and you pull in. That's usually where we stay in. Like that's what we read, that kind of area. So there's a little psychology there behind that.
I tend to hang out at the very top. That's why, me personally, as a hiring manager, I like to see the skills block as the first thing on there, and then how have you used those skills. There's an old newspaper term called above the fold, where when you see a newspaper in a newsstand, they fold it in half, and everything on the top half of that first page is like the most vital, important kind of stuff. And so when I look at this resume, I'm thinking like everything from here up is like the most relevant stuff that you need me to see, because when I'm spending 6 seconds scanning this resume, this is about as far as I'm getting. And I'm just kind of like blurring over the rest of that, going, yeah, okay, there's content, but I'm really only paying attention to like this first half of the page. Every manager looks at this and goes, I'm totally going to read this thing, and we don't. We're going to read it like 5 minutes before we call you. Once we make it, a quick decision on should I call this person, then we'll actually read it right before we call you. But we're not reading the whole thing top to bottom in order to make a determination whether to call you. That's why having a one-page resume is really important, and why it needs to be very concise and show in a hurry that you are a relevant candidate for the role that we have. So that's why I like seeing skills at the top, because I can look at this, I see your contact information, I see your skills, and go, yeah, you claim to have these skills, so you're on my short list of like, I'm going to call these people first, and then my maybe list, and then my no list, just gets dumped. But also, like, just thinking a little bit about, Tiffany, what you were saying about putting the skills block and the education over on a sidebar. This particular person went to a coding boot camp, and they've been in the industry for about 2.5 years. And in that 2.5 years, according to the skills block at the top, they've learned a few things, but their breadth of knowledge isn't very wide yet. And so I think having that second column where the skills are over on the side would be appropriate, and maybe call out like some of the project work, or definitely calling out more of that impact on these bullet points. And then you could move that education over there. And then you'd have a little more room in here for maybe putting some project work. So a couple
Yeah.
of things. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the sidebar doesn't always work for people. And I use it very sparingly. Like I give that as advice very sparingly, but in this case it would be pretty good. Another thing that came to mind that I'm losing, um, is that comment about reading resumes in general. Like what gets us to continue reading resumes is that first good upper fold, that first initial. These are my skills. This is who I am. This is what I'm applying for. That kind of like that sort of intention that you can grab right away, is what keeps us reading, and that's what gets people excited. That's what gets like callbacks that are like, oh, a hiring manager specifically asked to talk to you. Like those are the instances that really stand out,
Mhm.
right? Like those are the times when you get those callbacks that are like that. And yeah, that's sort of when you know that you've got a good resume.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple of things that they wanted to talk about and get specific feedback on. At their first job, they were a contractor. Or sorry, my first experience, I was a contractor at the place I currently work full time. So it looks like they started out as a consultant, and then they got hired on full time at this job. So it looks like they converted from a contract consultancy, and then they got hired full time by the company that they're at now. And some recruiters are confused by this. I would say I wouldn't worry too much about that. It just looks like you had two different jobs. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think because it's not like you've got a date overlap in here. And then at the current role, they got promoted from associate to mid-level engineer. Again, similar to the last review that we did, you could probably just put a single title on there and say, I'm now just a software developer at this role. I think that would, and then just say that you were there from April 2021 to present, and you don't necessarily have to have the two different roles sort of laid out on two different lines. You can just give them a single date range.
Yeah, I'm gonna I'm gonna give another suggestion. I come from professional services background, and if you were a consultant and you were a consultant for various companies, it's okay to say that you were working at that staffing company. But if you were specifically staffed for company A, then it's okay to say that you're a software developer, and maybe even put it in parentheses that you're a contractor and then that company's name.
Yeah.
And that will clear it up fully that you are a contractor and now you're a full-time associate at XYZ company. Okay,
Mhm.
so that's one way that you can go about it if you want. But the way that you have it right now, where you're a software developer, consultant, or software consultant, whatever it is, at staffing company, that's fine.
Yep. Cool. All right. So let's look at the languages. So the first thing that stands out to me is you list Java and then JavaScript. But when you look at the other technologies, you're listing your JavaScript framework and then your Java framework. And so again, when we read these lists, we think, you know, Java better than JavaScript. Then why do you know React better than Spring? So to me, those seem like they're out of order. So I would say if you're promoting yourself as a Java developer who also dabbles in front end, then I would put Spring at the front of the line. If you want to be a JavaScript developer who happens to also know Java, then you would move JavaScript on the first line to be the leftmost skill. Just that way, like vertically, they kind of look like they're sort of lining up like that. Me personally, I'm not a fan of the vertical bar as a separator. I would just throw some commas in there. From a human psychology point of view, it's interruptive to read a vertical bar. Plus when you get a whole bunch of information kind of crammed together like this, it can start to confuse a little bit on what that vertical bar actually is. So I would say up here, just leave spaces. And then when it comes to the skill block, I would just switch those to commas myself.
I think it might also give you trouble in resume parsers because they don't use those bars as delimiters. They use commas, so that might help you there too.
Mhm.
But I 100% agree on that skills section. If you want to have a skills section that's called programming, then that's a great way to just capture everything that you have over here, where you can have Java, Java, Spring Boot, and then JavaScript, React JS. Like I usually have the language itself and then the accompanying frameworks associated
Mhm.
with it. It's a little bit different if you're going to be applying for roles that have a specialty. So like if you were going to apply for a machine learning role, you'd have Python at the start, but maybe you'd have a separate one, separate skills section for specifically computer vision or deep learning, right? So that's one way you can go about it. And then like next to Python, right, where you have that, you can have the common libraries or the common frameworks. And that's
Mhm.
one way to showcase that you know certain technologies.
Yeah,
You
I like
have
that.
kind of you're kind of using everything as catch-alls. Like when you have technology as the kind of as a category, you're kind of using it as a catch-all, and that is okay, but it's also sometimes confusing because like Ian said, you don't know what to expect. Like as you continue reading this page, you start to see some database things like MySQL, MongoDB, right? And then you get Jenkins, something like Jenkins, which is CI, Selenium, which is testing, Pega, which is also testing, right? It's a little bit jumbled, and if you separate it out or you give it more intention, you can actually showcase like that you actually understand each of the kind of areas of computing and what it takes to be a software engineer if that's what you're applying for.
Yep. Awesome. Let's dive in on some of these bullet points. So again, just thinking about like not just narrating what you did at the job, but also what was the impact that you had. So you worked on a team of 8 developers to create a pharmacy depot. It was a full stack app for interacting and so on. Um, I, I don't know that it's as important that you sort of mentioned that, what their application is, because you're basically telling us like this is what the business does, or this was the project that we worked on. Contributed to modernizing effort at company A. So I mean, you were doing this for company A. So if you're at that company as an employee, you don't have to say that it was for their company. You're an employee there, so I'm automatically assuming that any bullet points are about work that you did for my company. Now, if it was a consultancy thing similar to this, and you could say I was contracted to company A, that would be appropriate. But I don't think you need to mention company A in this top block because you are a full-time employee there. Now, if you had multiple projects where this was just one project that you worked on and then there were other projects besides that, then that would be fine. But like down here, you're talking about that same pharmacy data and so on. So it kind of sounds to me like this is your primary focus at this job. And I think you don't have to sell me as a hiring manager on what that project was. You can just say, we worked on a pharmacy data application. Um, you know, I imagine for something like that, you're probably getting into like HIPAA compliance and data security and data privacy and stuff like that, especially when you're sharing that pharmacy data across the organization. I'm the first couple of questions I'm going to be asking you are all about data security and data privacy. and making sure that you're like encrypting that stuff in transit and all that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, I don't think that you need to explain quite so much about what the application is as part of this.
Yeah, for that first bullet point, it's a little bit of a filler in that sense. You also said you contributed to it, but not at the like. I don't understand what you mean by contributed. You were in a group of 8 developers, right? What did you actually do? So
Mm.
give it some thought. Like, in this year, yeah, about a year and some change, right? What did you do? If you were to just you were only allowed 10 seconds to tell me what did you actually do, what was that, like, talk about it, right? So it's more than contributed. You probably did some implementation, you probably did some coding. Like, what was the main thing that you worked on? And then if it was this full stack application, right, what was your breadth or scope of that work? Okay, so if your work was to implement X features in this full stack application using blah blah blah, that's what you did, right? Now
Mm.
this is how I have built out these bullet points, right? I take what you have, right, and I continue to ask you questions of like, what did you do? What was the impact? And then what technologies did you use? Okay, so continue to build that out, work a little bit harder on that bullet point, and you'll start to carve it out. And then the remainder bullet points come after that, because it gives you the little bits of nuance. At a high level, I said that I worked on this application and I use these technologies, right? I will break it down some more. So, if you were working on security features, right, that would be the high level bullet point. And then I would talk about what technologies that I use. Maybe I worked on the authentication. Maybe I secured PII data, whatever it is. You did some authorization OAuth work, right? Like, those are the
Mm.
bullet points that are informed based off of that high level bullet point that you initially created. So it should be more of a catch-all, so that you can see that flow here. Here in this case, there isn't that much of one, because that first bullet point just doesn't share like what did you do, and doesn't tell that story.
Mm.
So that's what we
Yeah.
usually look for in terms of like storytelling, or like understanding the breadth and depth of your work. And that'll come in time. Like, you get better at it as you demo your work, you get better at it as you talk to other engineers. So continue to kind of hone that.
That brings up a good point, and what one thing I was going to mention here, because this person is relatively new in the industry, maybe they don't understand like this is the actual impact of my contribution. Ask someone else on your team. Just say like, hey, if I were gonna like write up what I've done in the last 2 years or whatever, or in this case, yeah, 2.5 years total, because you were also consulting for them. Just say like, hey, over the last 2.5 years that I've been kind of working with and for your company, or the company, how have you seen my contribution make an impact? And just say like, I'm not looking for a job necessarily, but I want to like put stuff on my resume that talks about the impact that I've had. What would you tell me to put on the resume? Like, how would you kind of sum up my impact? Now, if you go to your manager and you ask them that, they're gonna, start getting afraid that you're brushing up your resume so you can leave. But other people on the team, you can definitely reach out to them, especially the senior devs on the team, and just say like, hey, all the stuff that we've been doing, could you show me how you put that kind of thing on a resume? Because I want to be able to talk about the impact that I had, and just kind of get their take on, yeah, you made 800 automated tests. That's great. What was the impact of that? Did you catch like a certain percentage of bugs? Was that test suite fast enough? Did it eliminate 30% of your user testing? Like, what was the impact of that? How did that make like an overall change to the team? And you might need to get some of that data from the people on your team. And I would say don't be afraid to ask them for that. And just, you can, even if you are looking for a job, you can give them a little white lie and be like, I'm not looking for a job. I just want to know how to put this on my resume, even if you are looking for a job. But get some other input from the people on the team to talk about like, oh yeah, don't forget about this thing that you did, because, they might remember things that you've forgotten as well. That's why it's important to like keep these things up to date as you're working at a job. Don't wait until you're looking for a job to try to remember everything that you did. Keep this kind of live resume going all the time, where you're like constantly adding your projects and bullet points, but talk to other people about what that impact is as well. That also makes really good sort of notes and whatever to go to your manager later and say, hey, can we have a chat about my compensation? And then you show up at that meeting a couple of weeks later and you bring them, I did this, this was the impact. I did this, this was the impact. I did this, this was the impact. They're going to have a hard time saying no to giving you a raise if you walk in with that impact kind of notes.
Yeah. Set goals around that. Like a good way to do that on a regular basis is also being a part of sprint reviews, retrospectives where you talk about the work that you did, or you get to call out how other people contributed to a project. That's also one way to like begin to get a language around it, is like calling out other people. You're like, oh wow, so this person's contribution led to this. Then it's easier for you to see,
Mm,
well, my contribution led to XYZ things. And I
right.
actually had an example that I wanted to do based off of that 800 automated unit tests
Mm-hmm.
bullet point there. I did a little bit of a write up here. So one way that you can change this bullet point is by saying that you created a testing suite to validate business logic and help the application meet CI/CD standards by creating over 800 automated tests in Pega. So that's one way
That's
that
great.
you can.
Yeah.
That's one way that you can kind of clean it up, and this gets into the format of what did you do, right? You created unit tests. What did you create unit tests? What or that did XYZ, right? Validated business logic using Pega tests, right? So it gets to be a little bit cleaner that way. So that's one example of how you can do it. Basically, you have
Mm,
the verb, what did you do, what was the impact, right? And then the skills and the tech that was
yep.
associated with it. So that's a nice way that you can begin to change some bullet points there.
Yep. I've had questions on the stream in the past of how do I list education if I don't finish, college or university. In this case, they didn't finish their doctorate. I think that this is a perfect way of doing it. Just say I've finished this many credits towards, something, or I completed so many credit hours of, such and such program. So if you don't finish, but you still want to let them know that you've done some amount of that education, I think putting something like this is a really great idea. Just say you've completed a certain number of credits.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty cool too. If you ever end up in the future needing to use anything related to physical therapy, there's a lot of tech companies that kind of sit at the intersection of different disciplines, and that's super cool. So that's something
Mm,
to keep in the back of your mind.
awesome. And someone else mentioned in chat, I forget who it was. They said they like the splash of color. I like that deep red in there too. I'd probably actually make your name that deep red as well, just to really stand out. Yeah, I think that would be fun. Now, Tiffany, what are your thoughts on putting your location on a resume as far as like city state?
Yeah, I think it's fine if you want to do that. If you're remote, that's typically fine. It gives you a good sense. If you're not comfortable with it, then that's totally fine. You can leave it out. I would just I'm talking about in the experience section. Also, if you have your city state and you live in a small city, you can also put down the metro area that's closest to you. And that's usually pretty helpful for people to get a good gauge of like where you're at or what city or like what state you're in without actually knowing all the details. Sometimes if you put like a very small town in a certain state, like no one's going to know where that is. And so you can always just go to the biggest metro area that's in your location.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, let's move on to number 3. And again, if we don't get to your resume tonight, don't worry. We're going to have a lot more folks on the stream helping out with resume reviews, and we'll have lots of feedback for these as we go. Now, in this case, this person did not anonymize their resume, but they did check that they were okay with that information. And so let me zoom out on this one. This one's got a lot of words. That's kind of the first thing that sort of stands out to me. We got a big sort of gaping hole over here on the side, and I think that this is probably okay here as far as like they're trying to keep all their dates on that margin, but there's a lot of words up here. Like this is pretty dense wording. I can guarantee you as a hiring manager, I'm not reading most of this. In fact, I'm probably going to skip over all of this so that I can get to that skills block. So again, me personally, I like having the skills block up the top. But Tiffany, first impressions?
Yeah, it would be nice if you had moved 3 of the bullet points under your 2 years of experience as a senior software engineer. and then just kept it smaller for your software engineering role. Because it's nice that you progressed from software engineering intern to engineer to senior, right? And I want to see that progression. So make sure when you're building out these bullet points that you kind of assign them to each of the roles so that I can see that progress and how you grew and at what level did you use different skills or different technologies. If you ended up if the thing that led you to become a senior engineer was something around collaboration or refactoring or migrations, that's pretty cool. That's pretty important. And that's one way that you can showcase it, right? Like if the thing that led you to become a senior software engineer was based off of security, some really great work that you did to optimize security, right? Like of an application, that's really cool. And we can dive deeper in that. But when you kind of condense it all like that, I can't tell what made you really stand out. And so you want to make sure that you break it up like that.
Yep. Taking a second look at the contact info here, pretty sure that's not a real phone number and so on. So I think we're safe. But again, Red Bank, New Jersey. I don't know what Red Bank is, but if it's near like Newark, New Jersey, just put Newark or something on there. Like Tiffany said in the last resume review, like try to just find a major metro area that is going to be well known. I also laughed a little bit at the Intergalactic Financial Exchange, USA Earth branch. But yeah, and for the sake of anonymizing your resume, kudos for the humor on that. But yeah, this is a lot of words. And again, I think condensing it down into like, what did you do? What was the impact? Like, how did that make your team better in some way? Because that's really what, like we said on one of the other resume reviews, we're really looking for a way to see the impact that you had to know if we want you on our team to make a similar impact on our team. And so we need to be able to find that quickly. Right before I call you on the phone, yeah, I'm going to go through and I'm going to read more about this and some of that stuff is going to stand out. But in the meantime, I think having less words, I think would be a big help here.
Yeah, and one really good example is that one bullet point that sort of sits in the middle. It says refactored middle tier Java Spring Boot applications. It's like the middle bullet point under work experience. Yeah, refactored middle tier.
Yep, there it
Java.
is. Okay. Yep. Again, like it
One way,
took me a minute to try to find it.
yeah,
Refactored middle tier. Yep.
one way that you can kind of edit that down is you can say that you refactored Spring Boot applications to minimize inefficient resource usage, which you have at the end, right? Using whatever it is, what technologies, right? Because you said you use some internal stored procedures, whatever. Think about it a little bit more, and then that's how you build the bullet point. So I would just move things around here in these bullet points, and then you'll automatically let go of the filler words, right? So if you say that you refactored Spring Boot applications and you did it right to minimize inefficient resource usages, then you can think about, okay, what did it actually take to do that? Did I have to do any load testing? Did I have to like optimize the JVM in any way, right? Like, did I have to do anything related to the garbage collection? Okay, that gets into the nitty-gritty details of Java and Spring Boot, right? And that's how you get that bit around your expertise and how you use the technologies. Okay.
Yep.
So you'll naturally be able to progress that if you think about it in that way of what did I do? Why did I do it? Right? What was the impact of doing it? And then what did I use or what did I do in order to make that happen?
Yep. I like it.
So kind of think about that way.
The other thing that stands out to me about this resume is you've got some interesting quantified data on here, but the quantified data isn't your impact. Like, you collaborated with stakeholders, but the stakeholders handled $100 million in volume. You didn't. You designed, implemented several high traffic web pages, whatever, that got 100,000 hits per day. The website was able to handle that traffic. So that one, I think you could reword a little bit because you did have a more direct hand in making something that could get 100,000 hits a day. But when you've got like $100 million in volume, like if you were a salesperson and you said you did 100 million, annual volume, like that would be a massive, impressive kind of bullet point. But you could have ended the sentence, to all U.S. banking service clients, and the rest of this sentence would have no meaning because that wasn't your individual impact. Now, if you did something that helped increase it from 50 million to 100 million, then you could share that kind of information. But again, that's talking about your direct impact on, what improved for the business.
Yeah, that's what you're missing here. You want to start off with what did you do? Maybe there was something that you did to scale the system, right? To be able to handle that much amount of volume annually. And then what you did in order to make that happen is you collaborated with stakeholders.
Mm.
Okay. So kind of think about it that way. It's like, what did you do to make it happen? Well, I collaborated with stakeholders. I took in their design requirements. And then, the thing that I actually did, or the skill that I actually did, was I implemented it, right? So continue to kind of break it down that way. But yeah, that's a really good call out.
Cool. So yeah, I think overall, I think a lot of these bullet points could be really condensed, just to show a little bit quicker like what that impact is. Now they went from being an intern to being a software engineer to being a senior engineer. So they've been at this company for quite a while. So June 2015 again to present. So they've been there for 7 years. And I like that you kind of called out like this is what I did as an intern, but yeah, kind of like Tiffany was saying, like which of these things did you do as a software engineer, and then which of these things did you do as a senior software engineer? Because you kind of break it down by the role for your internship, but not for the rest of it. So I would like to see more of that progression. Like, maybe you did these bottom 2 bullet points as a regular engineer, and then these other things, were part of your senior engineer experience. I would like to see a little bit more around that.
Yep. You're in a good spot of having this whole block, right? Because sometimes that's where you start out. You're like, well, I did all these things. Now I have to understand at what level did I do them at, and then do more, do more refining on these bullet points, and then you get the nice carving. I see this as a really good start.
Yep. Cool. And then the skills block, again, we've got like advanced, proficient, advanced, proficient. And again, these are pretty subjective terms. So I would probably remove these and just have programming languages and then just list them from left to right in what you know best to what you know least. But again, if you're going to apply for a Java developer role, you want to list it as programming languages, Java, comma, JavaScript, comma, TypeScript, comma, Python. You want to look like a Java developer who knows all the rest of this stuff. And you've used, in this case, I think Maven, right? Is going to be, no, Maven is a testing tool, I think.
It's a build tool.
I forget.
Yeah.
It's a build. Yeah, it's a build tool. That's right. Yeah, we got Spring Boot here at the end. So like, again, you're listing, a whole bunch of JavaScript and jQuery and Jest for testing, and then Maven, which is your Java builder, and then your framework at the very end. So I would reposition these a little bit similar to what we said on another resume review. Put like Java, comma Spring, comma JavaScript, comma React, and then like list some of these other tools as just like other libraries that I've used. And then miscellaneous, I would probably still list HTML and CSS as languages. Markdown, I don't think has any value. I mean, if you happen to know Markdown, that's great, but I don't think that's going to be terribly important. Node.js, that's not miscellaneous. That's a framework. Get that up here in the frameworks. Webpack, whether you use Webpack or NPM or what's the other one?
Yeah.
Or Bun, I think is the new hotness for all that stuff. Like, that's fine. Open API, I mean, that's going to be really important if you're doing backend development, like really promoting that you do Open API or which is the new version of Swagger. But Jira, I mean, I would say if you're into Jira administration, then put Jira on here. But if you're just like, I know how to use Jira, it's like, okay. I mean, that's going to be kind of an expectation. Knowing that you know Jira, if I also use Jira, then that's fine. But if I use GitHub Projects or some other tool, if I know that you know Jira, then okay, we can show how you're going to translate some of that skill. But again, you want to tailor these resumes to what's important to my company. And so take away the stuff that you don't think my company's going to care about. I would rather see more white space on here, and during the interview, you can say, "Oh, I happen to also know this and this," than to list a whole bunch of stuff on the resume and overwhelm me with all of this information. Some of which I'm just not going to care about.
Yeah, my take here is, you know, be a little bit more opinionated about what you actually want to work on and what technology you want to use. Like I see HTML and CSS, and sometimes I think like you're moving. Yeah, from what you were writing in your resume, it seemed like you were moving away from that. And even in the skills, some of the frameworks that I suspect you don't really want to be spending most of your time building, you know, single page applications and
Right.
writing in Markdown. So you can get rid of those three, like HTML, CSS, Markdown, goodbye, and then have Node.js, Webpack, Redux at the front, and that's pretty nice, right? And I wouldn't call it miscellaneous. Give it a real skill category, right? Like give it its
Hmm.
due diligence, and then for your programming languages, let's consolidate and clean that up, and then get rid of any of the ones where you're just judging yourself, right? Advanced, proficient, just get rid of those. You'll save space, right? You'll save another line by doing
Yeah.
that. So that's that. Yeah,
Cool.
and Maven isn't a framework, so you can even get rid of Maven, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, if you do Java, they're going to expect that you know some kind of build pipeline kind of thing, whether it's
If you
Maven or something else.
Yeah, if you're at the point where you know Spring Boot, um, I would already expect that you're well into the Java ecosystem and you don't need to put everything in there.
Yeah.
And again, if you're applying for an enterprise software engineering role, and Jason, this person also shared some feedback that they wanted us to target specifically around like career development and progression, right?
Right.
Like if you know that you're going to be progressing into a enterprise or a different type of industry, right? Like maybe you want to pare down all of the TypeScript frameworks and technologies, and you want to boost up the Java sections. You want to have Maven in there, you want to have Spring Boot, you want to have JVM, like whatever it is, any of the specific Java technologies. It's been a while for me. You can have that in there, and you can have it at the forefront, right? That's one way that you can do it. And what I like to do when I have that additional space is I'll typically have a little summary of who I am, what I've done, and what I'm looking for. And that makes it very clear that, okay, I may have all of this experience of doing a vast variety of things, but this is who I am. And then this is like all the things that I've done to get me to this role that I'm applying for now. And that's really strong because that's essentially your 30-second elevator pitch for any questions that you may get about, like, oh, so you've done this, like, how does it all tie in together? You have an answer for that, and you can clearly say, hey, this is
Mhm.
who I am, this is what I've done, and then this is where I'm going towards. So,
Yeah.
take me or leave me, right?
Yeah. So the overall notes that we got with this resume is like, I want to get out of the finance industry. I want to like work in a different kind of industry, and I haven't had to interview since I got this internship. So they've been at this one job for 7 years, and they want to get into something that's not finance. In that case, I think having skills at the top, I think is going to be even more important. And you may want to think about like, what kind of job are you going to be applying for? And, what do they do? So if you want to get out of finance and you want to go into, I don't know, give me some other industry like gaming. I'll just default to gaming. Maybe put a side project up at the top. So you've got your skills block, and then under that, show me a project that you've done some game development or something. And then I would minimize the amount of bullet points. If you don't want to work in finance, I would look at this and go, wow, look at all the stuff you've done for finance. Like, I want to hire you, but I'm going to put you on like my finance engineering team. Like, I'm not going to hire you for the game development side of it. I'm going to like have you work on the finance side because look at all this great experience you have. Um, I think you could downplay this, and instead of giving me 8 bullet points, give me 3 or 4 bullet points that show the impact that you had at the company. But if you want to be a game developer instead, just picking out that random industry, then you need to show me that you have some capability in that other industry. Besides, yeah, I've just got raw technical talent that I can apply anywhere. You need to show me why you care about my particular business or my particular trajectory as a company, and that you've worked on some kind of project or some kind of work that's applicable to what we do. So, just playing on this one, for example, because I work a lot with APIs at Postman, seeing open API in here. If you want to go get a backend engineering role where you're working on API development, then I would make open API way more prominent on this resume to say, like, I've been studying up on this and I know all about the open API spec and I've used version 3.0 and 3.1, blah, blah, blah. Like, explain how you used that technology at this job to show me that you've got what I'm looking for at my job. So I think, depending on where you want to pivot and what you want to get into instead of finance, you need to show me that you've got some capability of working in that industry, as opposed to just, I've got, this giant list of technical skills that may match perfectly fine. I tell a story on my stream a lot about how I interviewed at Yahoo back in like 2005 or 2006, and I crushed the technical interview, but I wasn't a culture fit because I was interviewing with the fantasy football team and I don't give a rip about football. So you have to show me that you've got some alignment with my company and that you care about what I do, and not just that you've got technical skill, because that may not be enough.
Yeah, and a comment about Open API, right? You started as a software engineer in 2016, so maybe you were even using Swagger at some point, and that can showcase like that you had a long history with Open API, so you
Mm-hmm.
really do understand it. That's one way that you can continue to expand in certain areas if that's what you're looking to do. This person also has a leadership experience section, which I thought
Yeah.
was really interesting, because some of the bullet points there didn't quite showcase a lot of their actual leadership impact. And I thought that it would be really interesting if you had brought in pieces of that into the senior software engineering role that you have up there, because that work in and of itself is about leading milestones, having more breadth or more ownership, technical ownership, and
Mm-hmm.
technical leadership, than this experience section, a leadership experience section actually had. And so if you do decide that you don't want to keep that leadership experience section because you're going to showcase leadership skills or applications that you actually had in the workplace, then that'd be a good way to have space. That'd be an additional 6 lines for a project section. So that's just an idea there. I had a few pieces of feedback on the leadership experience section, though, if we want to get there, or if this person wanted that feedback.
Yeah, I think it's helpful just if you've got other thoughts on like how these things could be worded, or anything like that, I say let's do it.
Yeah, cool. So I think like when it comes to leadership or experiences, you want to showcase how you took ownership or responsibility over something, and how that project or that opportunity succeeded because of you. And one thing that like stood out to me was that you were a part of a mentorship program for new hires and interns
Yeah.
in the tech department that you worked at. And I think that's really big. And you just saying that you facilitated and participated really undercuts like what exactly you did for those interns and or for those people who were just starting out. I think you did a lot more than just facilitate mentorship. There's a lot more that goes into building out a mentorship program. So I would try to dig in a little bit deeper of like, what did you do that if you didn't do it, it would have failed, right? And I'm
Mm.
pretty sure it was something. Maybe you coordinated the project. Maybe you were the person who built out this matching system for the mentorship program, right? Maybe you were the person who coordinated all of the work, or you set up the meetings. Like, that was actual contributions that you had to this mentorship program, right? And you
Yeah.
want to talk about like how many people were a part of it, like what did it do, was it for a summer, what was the scope of this thing, was it a reoccurring mentorship program? Maybe it was the first time that this company had a mentorship program, and because you did xyz things, it's now a program that people are excited to come to, or this is now a hallmark of why someone would want to work at this company, right? Like, that's
Mm.
huge.
Yeah.
I think there's other things like some work that you did as serving as a head teaching assistant. You kind of say like, oh, I served as a teaching assistant, but you didn't talk about like what you did in order to make that successful, right? So I think sometimes it's easy to just say like leadership is a title, but it's really a lot more than that, right? Like, yeah, we have a ton of people who are managers, but are they really leaders?
Right.
um, it's beyond that
For sure.
title. So I want to push you to think about that some more, because if you're going to have a leadership section, you're going to want to scream as a strong leader.
Yep. And again, I think all three of these bullet points, you could definitely talk a lot more about what the impact was. Like, as you worked on that mentorship program for new hires, what impact did that have over time? How did you refine that over time and say, like, over the span of a year and a half, in this role, our onboarding process went from 4 weeks to 2 weeks, or it went from, an 8 week onboarding to like a 2 week onboarding or whatever. Like, how did that get better? Like, show me what that impact was. Or as a head teaching assistant, what impact did you have? I mean, 300 to 500 students per semester over the course of 2 years. That's a lot of semesters. I can do some mental math on what that impact is, but make my job easier. Like, do that math for me and tell me what kind of impact that had. And what impact you had just overall as a head TA. What were your responsibilities? Aside from like overseeing sophomore, junior programming and electronics course, like, what were your responsibilities? Were you doing grading? Were you responsible for, one-on-ones with students? Like, like, I need more data than just these bullet points here, because like Tiffany said, I think a lot of this plays into what you evolve into as a senior developer, where you start doing a job and then you kind of take a step up and you do a little bit more, and then you step up and you do a little bit more, and you step up and do a little bit more. I want to see that progression as well. And so I would love to hear more information about these bullet points myself. But again, it depends on the company and it depends on the role. But if, depending on the kind of industry, this person was saying that they want to get out of finance, depending on the industry that you want to go into, some of these bullet points are going to be more important to some companies than others. And so you need to figure out how you want to position these bullet points that are going to make the biggest impression on the companies where you're applying for these jobs.
Yeah, and this is really good experience. Like,
Yeah.
I really like how Ian you put it. It's like you took a little, you stepped up a little bit each time, and you didn't start just from when you entered the workforce. You did it when you were still a student, and that's really cool. Like, you showcased that you cared about this type of work. You had a passion for it. You wouldn't have done it otherwise. You could have easily been just a regular teaching assistant. You didn't have to be a head teaching assistant. You didn't have to do it for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
You could have chosen something else, but there's something here that made you choose it. And this was just the start of it. And it's okay to just say, like, when you're a head teaching assistant, be really particular about what you did. And even though you may have like this sort of inclination to judge yourself, again, like, you were still a student. That was X amount of years ago, right? And that opportunity of being a teaching assistant for that amount of time led you to take on, like, have the confidence to take on more in the future. And I think that's really cool to be able to showcase. And I think sometimes it's easy in these kinds of settings, like in a resume, where you just want to be a little bit more humble, right? And you want to, oh, if I abstract it or say it this way, someone will understand who you kind of try to shape that impression, right? But I would be really bold when it comes to the ways that you contributed, even because this is a resume, it's supposed to be history, right?
Mhm.
So just be this is just some encouragement to showcase all the great work that you've been doing.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. I think we'll do one more, Tiffany, and I'm going to skip to number 5. And let me pull up the notes on this one. So this particular person is in Nairobi. They're a third-year astrophysics student. I prefer working at startups because I'm able to wear many hats and I'm greatly involved in what I'm making, though I'm open to working at larger companies. One of my goals is to be a senior or mid-level developer by the time I graduate. That's why I'm applying to full-time roles even while I'm still in school. I'd like tips on how to get my resume past the applicant tracking systems. I think trying to work while you're in school, I mean, you can definitely build up some experience there, and we can definitely see on your resume that you've been building up some experience. But I think having a goal of graduating and immediately stepping into an intermediate or senior level role, I think some companies they may wonder a little bit like, how did you balance working to gain that experience as well as focusing on your education to actually graduate? As a manager, I would worry that you're kind of you're going to be burned out. Like by the time you graduate, you're going to be burned out because you've been working and going to school and trying to do all this stuff at the same time. Um, it's ambitious and you're taking initiative, but that would be one of my primary worries, just starting out, based on that description that you gave us. Tiffany, any thoughts on that sort of introduction? And then we'll talk about like overall layout here.
Yeah, I actually really liked this person's predicament scenario, their ask for help, because I think a lot of people will benefit from some of the advice that we're giving here for this. I guess just generally, like in terms of like getting to where you want to be, you do want to loosen some of the expectations around there in case you don't get something, but it's not impossible. One thing that I like to tell people is just that, in terms of a title, you want to think about it a little bit further than just a title or just a role, because like what happens when you get that software engineering position, senior role, whatever title it's at, right? There's gonna be certain level of expectations and responsibilities, and it's not like you're gonna like everything that comes with it. So really think about like, how do you want to feel when you have this role? What do you actually want to be doing? And have that be like your entry point into conversations when you are in interviews. So if there is something that you want to work on, maybe it's something engineering related, maybe you want to be building software systems, maybe you want to be working specifically on front end development work, whatever it is, just have a good sense of what that is. And then that's how you're going to actually do that transition. Like that's how you're going to shape the rest of your resume. I think the thing that's really missing here is just that kind of summary of like, this is who I am, this is what I want to be working, this is who I am, what I've done, and then this is how I'm going to get, this is what I'm looking for, right? This is how I'm going to get there. And you tell that story that way. Right
So
now, there's a lot of things that are kind of disparate, right? So just be very clear about that.
So let's talk about that for a sec. So, would you encourage someone to put a summary on the resume or to accompany this with a cover letter? I typically tell people like the cover letter gives me context to the facts, which are your resume. So the resume is just the facts, where the cover letter could say like, this is who I am, this is why I care about these kinds of projects and have been working on, going to school and working at the same time. Eduardo also said in chat, it's a very US EU culture. In other countries, it is pretty common to work and study at the same time. So great point. But would you encourage this person to add that context in a cover letter, or to actually add a summary at the top of the resume?
Add a summary to the top of the resume. It doesn't have to be more than 2 lines. It's
Mhm.
literally,
Okay.
"Hi, my name is Tiffany," or "I'm a engineering manager leading teams of teams. I'm looking for more opportunities to grow my leadership experiences." Like that's for me, right? For
Mhm.
you, it could be, "I'm a software engineer. I've built front end and back end or full stack applications. I'm now looking for an opportunity full time." Whatever it is,
Yeah.
just be honest about it, and then that's kind of your entry point. I like to do that. I'm not discouraging you from um, working and studying at the same time. I think that's a really great thing. But the reason why I think you have to be really clear about what you want is because you're essentially circumventing some of the things. You're basically condensing time, right? Like when you say that you want to have a mid-level role, you're like, okay, well, I don't need to spend X amount of years getting working in this associate level or this internship level. I want to go here. I want to be here. I want to work at this level. And when you do that, and you just want to be sure of like what it is that you want, how you're going to get there, and your resume has to show that. And there's a lot of things that I pointed out here that's going to help you get there. And I think that's the part that we want to get into here.
Awesome. The other thing that I think is going to be really important for you to convey, is, if you want to get into programming, that's fine. But how does that tie into getting a bachelor's in astrophysics and space science? Like, do you want to work on software for astrophysics and space science, or are these like just separate things? Like you started down this road, in this particular area of education, but now as a software developer, you want to focus on web-based applications. Is it going to be space-related, kinds of things? I think that those would be interesting things because right now, when I look at this experience, BIP Marketplace, not sure what that is. It might have been anonymized. Um, but I don't see a lot of like, oh, this was space related and this was also space related. I mean, Webb Relayer, is that like the James Webb telescope? Because that wasn't even launched in December 2021, I don't think yet. And so I'm a little bit curious, like A star network bindings. Like A star is kind of like a graph network, like a graph traversal kind of algorithm. So to me, like you're studying astrophysics, but I don't really see a lot in here. Like you've got a music playing kind of thing. Like I don't see how you're applying the software to what you're studying, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Um, but that's something that I would want to know as a hiring manager. Is like, what's your ambition here? Because to me, it like I'm again just kind of going back to that inherent worry that I have of like, are you spreading yourself too thin where you're trying to like work through this particular kind of education, but the engineering work that you want to do is a completely different field? Is your expectation that that's going to merge at some point, that once you graduate and you finish that you're going to be a software developer in some sort of like space astrophysics kind of role, or do you want to do something completely different? I would be looking at some of those things.
Yeah, that's why the summary may help with that. I would move education further down because you just want to showcase that you're full-time material, you're full-time ready. So move education down. You even have your anticipated graduation date, right? They don't need to know that until later. You put down this little section called relevant coursework, but none of the coursework is relevant to the rest of your resume. So, just get rid of that. I know sometimes it can be really tempting to showcase, well, I've taken all of these technical courses, challenging courses, right? But it doesn't say anything about like the actual role that you're applying for. And it's hard to tell if that's true or not, at least in terms of giving you feedback, because you don't have that summary. So just be a little careful there. And then that's all I had for at least the top half of this.
I would say remote sensing, again, depending on the kind of software that you want to do. If you want to get into like IoT, things like that, where you're getting into like what Tiffany and I have studied with computer engineering, where you're actually going to get into controlling hardware. If this is the case of like getting into sensors and working with remote data and stuff like that, then maybe that's going to be applicable. But yeah, space flight mechanics, like it's probably not going to be relevant if you just want to go build React apps and be a front end developer. Like, how are you tying that in? If it doesn't tie in, I would take it off the resume. I agree with Tiffany on that.
Yeah. And for the skill section, just be a little careful with the formatting. You have a kind of
A lot of
one,
space, in
yeah.
between these. Yep.
There's one line where it's just GTKRS, right? And I think you hit enter a little quickly on that one. So just be a little careful about that. Other than that, that was about it.
Yep.
There.
I would probably make sure that you line these dates up. So you've got December 2024 kind of out on this margin, which looks to be about the same width of the margin over here on the left side. But then none of your other dates line up on that margin, like none of the other dates. So I would say like make sure that all those line up. And then also like there's a lot of content on this page too. And so I can see why you've got the horizontal lines in here to kind of separate the sections. But then this heading, like some of these headings like really push up against that line. Some of them you've got a lot of space in between that line and the next heading. And so just from a consistency point of view, it looks a little bit off in that regard. So I would say like from that perspective, I would probably reformat some of this, maybe shrink the font size. Like if it's larger than 10-point font, I would say set everything to 10-point font and then figure out from there, like, can you reduce some of these bullet points to like give you more vertical space to kind of lay things out a little more vertically. I think that'll probably help clean that up a little bit, but yeah, cool. Let's dive in on some of these bullet points here for the front end experience.
Oh, let's just jump. Let me add a few
Okay,
more things about that
sure.
formatting then. If you're looking to save more space, one way that you can do that is by combining the role and then put a comma right after and then the company, right?
Hmm.
So that's one way to save additional line space. Also, for your projects, if you have any links to them, I know you gave each project a name, which is really great because sometimes people will talk about their projects and there's no name associated with it. But if there is code, a GitHub or anything else that's associated with it, you can just do project name and then
Hmm.
have a link. Just write down link and then hyperlink it, right? So that's one way that you can do that. That's all I had for advice. And then you have leadership experience, which kind of sits right there. Your projects don't have dates, so I think that's kind of like the that's a little bit distracting um, from like a perspective. So that's just something to note there is if there's some way that you can kind of balance out the right and left sides of your resume.
Yeah.
That's one thing you can do.
One thing that I like to see with projects is tell me why you built this for a user. So I like the first bullet point or a line right under the title. And I agree with Tiffany. If you can get some links in here for either GitHub or if you've got it deployed somewhere, that's even better. That I can just go experience what you've built and not just go stare at code on GitHub or wherever you're hosting that code. But I like that first bullet point to be like users can blah 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 because it shows me that you've got user empathy in mind, that you built this for a particular kind of user for a particular purpose. Um, and what I say on the stream a lot is, if Tiffany's a venture capitalist and I'm literally in an elevator, that's why we call it an elevator pitch, because you got like 15 to 30 seconds to be like, I built this app for users to go manage blah 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 and save 50% on their time management or whatever, and ding, the door opens and they walk out going, wow, it's a great idea. But if I'm in that elevator, I'm like, yeah, I made this really great Rust project with Cargo to scrape some website and retrieve anime chart data. It's like, well, eventually you're getting to the point of what that project actually does.
Yeah.
But you're starting with like the technology that you use to build up, and then you're telling me what the project is even for. Tell me what the project's for. Tell me the tech stack later. The tech stack is less important than knowing you've got user empathy. And so I would love to see kind of that statement happen first, and then tell me like what you learned by building it. Tell me about the technologies, and again, things like impact, like I saved 10% CPU time and save 50 megabytes of memory. Like those are great impact statements. So anytime that you can get those kinds of impacts on there, I think is great.
Yeah, I really like that advice. That's what I like to do with my projects is that first bullet point is typically a little bit of a description of what the project actually does, and it gives people a good sense of like what was potentially your role in that project, because you can have a variety of projects. Like it could be an open source project and you contributed a small bit of it, but that first bullet point should be make it pretty clear, like if you were the person who created it, then okay, I created like don't say I created, but say created a CLI application, right, to play all songs in the current working directory using XYZ technologies, right? And then
Yep.
that's kind of a nice way to merge like your first and second bullet point for that play song project, right? And then you can actually talk about what did you do, like, what did you do, and then what skills did you use to do it? Well, what did you do? What was the impact of it? What skills did you use, right,
Yep.
to make it happen? So that's actually a really nice way to further build this out a little bit more, because in this play song app, and for a lot of the experiences that you have here, I think you're underplaying the contributions that you made to each of the kind of areas. So that's something to note is once you condense like that first and second bullet point, you'll see, oh, well, then, I built this app, but the only kind of contribution that I made to it was that you tested against 10K songs, right? 10,000 songs.
Yep.
Well, okay, what happened in between creating the app and testing against 10,000 songs, right? Then now you have some areas where you can kind of continue to talk about the different technologies the different aspects or components of Rust that you use
Hmm.
to build the app. What kinds of features did the app have to have, right? So that gets into more of the nitty gritty details. But make sure you have that consistency. Make sure you double check on spelling because there were a few
Hmm.
um, spelling blips. And then if you're going to be using any um, acronyms, make sure you spell it out before you use it.
Yep. Like I had to go look up what rodeo crate was. That's actually a real thing. That's not a misspelling. But like I don't know Rust, so I didn't know what rodeo crate was. But it's crates.io, not just the word crate. So again, just being aware of how you're spelling things out. The other thing too about this impact of like, because I used Rust, it saved 10% CPU and 50 megabytes of less memory. Compared to what? Like, did you start it in Python and then you went to Rust and realized it was, less intensive on the CPU and used less memory? Like, what did you start building it in that then made you move to Rust to see this impact? That's kind of that thing that we're missing in the story of, you designed it and then by testing it, you found out this other thing. But like, how did you know that that was a problem that you needed to test against 10,000 songs to make sure, and then how did you quantify that data? I think would be a good piece of the story that we're missing there. Cool. Tiffany, other thoughts? Do you want to go into the job experience?
Yeah, let's go into job experience. I think we've shared a lot about the projects.
Okay. All right. So when we look at the work that you've done, so you've done some contract work. You're also a technical writer, and then you also have done some web development. So the web development looks like maybe ended in May 2022, but your technical writing is still ongoing. So I guess if this one is still ongoing, I might put like present roles at the top. But if you're trying to promote yourself as a web developer, I can kind of see why that one would be first. But the recency of it, you were only at this role for a couple of months. So as a hiring manager looking at that, I would say, why were you only there for 5 months? Was it a 5 month project? Like, did you do all of the work and then it was over? I might want to hear a little bit more about why that job was short. But you've got some really good quantified stuff on here, productivity boost of 5%, things like that. Those are great quantifiable impact statements. And so they're a little wordy. I think you could reduce some of the words in here, but I love that, like, this is, the kind of stuff that you're pulling up here. Worked with a cross-functional team of 5 remote across 3 locations, closely collaborate with designer. I think that's less important to say. You could just say, as part of your work, you were a remote front end developer, and you don't necessarily have to say like where everybody was. If it comes up in the interview, you can say like, where was everybody else? You can be like, oh, they were also in India, they were also in Miami. Then you could share that. But I don't think it makes much of an impact to know those locations on the resume itself.
No, I had that crossed out, 3 locations, and then the parentheses. I crossed it out. I mean, you work cross-functionally remote. You worked cross-functionally with a remote team and collaborated with the designer to do something, right? Like if you're gonna say you did something, like I want to know the impact and
Yep.
what did you do? So make the most out of each of the kind of bullet points, and then you also had a bullet point right after that that says implemented responsive designs for the marketplace, making them more mobile friendly. I'd actually move that to the top because that gives a summary of, oh, my voice is cracking a little bit but that gives you a good summary of like the work that you did, and then the ways that you contributed, because that first bullet point that you have about redeveloping different pages using React, right? That was part of implementing responsive designs, right, for the marketplace.
I
And
agree.
talk about which marketplace.
Yep, I agree. Efficiently communicate with the team, asynchronous communication. Yeah. So I think some of the grammar in this is a little bit broken. But I mean, communication on the team, I mean, that's going to be important because you worked remotely. I think this last bullet point, like telling me the technologies you use to have that communication, is not important. Knowing that you worked remotely as a team, spread around the world, I think is enough to tell me on that you don't necessarily have to tell me what tooling that you used or where people were. Just, like Tiffany said, I worked asynchronously remote with, 5 other people you know,
Yeah.
in 3 different continents, you know, doing such and such, like doing a particular kind of work. So again,
Yeah.
just sharing that impact.
Yeah. Combine that last bullet point with that middle one. That's what I had as advice was, if you're working cross-functionally with the remote team, you're doing an asynchronous communication, right? There you go. You combine it as one, and then now you saved an additional line. So that's kind of a nice thing that you can do. And then, like I said, move that second to last bullet point at the top. Um, and that's all I really had as advice for that kind of first half.
Cool.
I also agree with Ian about that role that you're currently in right now as a technical writer. Have that at the top and talk about the different ways that you've been contributing. I mean, you wrote freelance articles, right? But what open source projects were you helping to onboard at the company? Like what is the impact? What open source technologies did you use? Did you actually use them for anything? If you're promoting open source, that's also related to the community, and that's a really great way to showcase that you care about the industry, you care about the different developer tools that are out there, right? If these open source projects are developer tools, I'm just assuming, right? But if they're not and they're helping other people in different industries, like talk about that, because that may have an intersection into any of the roles that you're applying for when you're looking for a full-time role.
Awesome. All right. Any thoughts on the contract role at the bottom, Tiffany?
That's really oh yeah, I think I had one thing. Oh yeah, be a little careful about the first bullet point, right? Again, you want to showcase how you're ready to be in a full-time role. So you want to be careful to say like, how did you contribute or what did you do, instead of talking about collaborating. That doesn't say much about who you are as or what you can do as a software engineer. Also, the formatting is a little bit strange on that. Contract is lowercase and everything else is uppercase, or yeah, it's all you see the format.
Yeah.
I would contract capitalize and put it in parentheses instead of a dash. You don't use dashes pretty much anywhere else in your resume, so just be a little careful of that. You also did a lot of really great work here, um, but I would I would maybe just edit the first kind of lines for each thing, because
Mm,
collaborated isn't what needs to be at the top.
right.
I would say like collaboration is a good thing in code reviews. So, review that last bullet point as well, where you said you participated in code reviews and received feedback. It's a little bit more passive or learning sense. I think when it comes to code reviews, pair programming, it's good to showcase um, that you were also not just doing that work to learn, because this is a software developer role, and you're kind of advertising it as like, I'm contributing to this. Obviously, like you're learning from a lot of people, right? But you want to showcase how that was also part of the contribution that you were making, right?
Yeah.
So, kind of tie that in. And I think the reason why I give that as advice is because the other two bullet points that sit in the middle there are a little bit weak, in the sense that you shared that you wrote unit tests, and then also created npm packages, but I want to hear about the actual reward system that you were building, right?
Right.
That you're building out. You're collaborating with two teammates. That's a pretty lean team. I suspect that you did a lot more work than what you
Mm.
have as bullet points. So think about how you're again articulating the actual impact, and then the technologies that you're using in order to do that full circle.
One thing that I would probably do as well is actually give me a bullet point on like what web tools is, what is web relayer. Like, while Tiffany was giving all that advice, I'm like scrambling to look up what is the web relayer, found out it's part of the web protocol. Web protocol is like, you know, you can implement it in Solidity. It's Web3, basically. It's privacy
Mhm.
for transferring assets across different blockchain protocols and maintaining financial privacy. It's like, tell me that on the resume. Like, if you're
Yeah.
if you're dabbling in Web3, like the only thing that I know is up here in your skills block, you mentioned Web3.js. But like, mention that this is Web3 work. I mean, if they're in the Web3 space and they know what this is, then great. But if my company doesn't do Web3, like, I'm gonna look at this and go, yep, those are words. I have no idea what kind of impact that is or how that would benefit me and my company. Would any of that actually like make my team better in any way? So depending on what you're working on, but if you're dabbling in Web3, like tell me that in like as part of that work.
Yeah, yeah. Again, you want to make sure that you're talking about the skills. In this first bullet point, you're talking about how you collaborated with teams, and then you did that to implement, right? Um, a reward system in relayer. But
Yeah,
you want to showcase like what is the technologies, tie it back in. Make sure you have those 3 points each time in all the bullet points. So do a little bit of an audit of like, is it clear what I did, the impact of it, and then the technologies or the scope of which it operated in. So it's a good way to just do a little sanity check and make sure that every bullet point that you have that talks about your work and your contribution like effectively communicates that you're a full-time engineer. You're someone who's at that level already.
yep, awesome. Cool. Well, Tiffany, we've been going for close to 2 hours here, and I know that you still wanted to stream yourself. So, do you want to wrap up and call it there at those 4 resumes, and we'll kind of wrap up here. And if you want to hop off the call and like go set up your stream and start streaming, we'll raid over to you, and we'll continue to hang out here, and we'll talk a little bit about the 1,000 follower giveaway that we're going to do, and some of those plans that we got for that.
Yeah, I hope everyone found that useful. Again, like these resume reviews are really great for the community because we do them for free and we just share
Yeah,
some of our thoughts after being in so many tech interviews and also being hire manager. I think that insight is really helpful for anyone who may not have that. So these are great, and thank you all for trusting us to submit them and ask for advice. I
for
hope
sure.
that
Yeah.
it's helpful. Thanks, Ian, for the space.
Oh, of
I'm
course.
actually going to be streaming stories about work life and burnout. So if y'all want to join me, that'll be on my stream later. Thanks everyone for hanging out. See you around.
Yeah. Thanks again, Tiffany. Really appreciate your time and perspectives. Like I said at the beginning of the stream, it's important that we hear lots of perspectives. Tiffany and I did agree on a lot of things, but there were also a couple of things where it's like, I would do it this way. I would do it that way. And that's okay. I think as you hear those different kinds of advice, you can kind of form your own opinion on this is how I'm going to make my resume. And so don't ever just listen to me. Don't ever just listen to Tiffany. Man, we got good advice. I mean, a lot of nuggets here, but ultimately you have to figure out which advice you want to implement to make that resume. So I think that it's important to have that kind of perspective, and we're going to be doing a lot more of these resumes on the stream. So again, appreciate everybody sending them in and trusting us with those. So Tiffany, thanks again for hanging out. Everybody hang out on the stream. We're going to talk about the giveaway while Tiffany takes off and sets up her stream, and then we'll go right over into Tiffany's channel once she's up and running over there. So thanks again, Tiffany. We'll see you over on your channel in a little bit.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Right. All right. Cool. Well, super appreciate Tiffany's time. Tiffany was awesome to kind of donate her time and help us out and share those perspectives. So really, really appreciate that. Cool. Well, let's go over to this screen here. We'll get the chat back up and running. So yeah, it was awesome. Thank you again, everybody, for submitting those resumes. And Eduardo, thank you for the hydrate reminders. Appreciate those kind of as we've been going. I need to zoom out a little bit on that camera. I'm like super zoomed in right now. Let me back that off a touch. There we go. It's better. And we'll go in one more. All right. So as some of you noticed, when you change the nano leafs behind me, I've now got the light up and above and below. The one up here on the ceiling is now an IoT based light, as well as the one right here under the monitor. And so some of the patterns, like if you set it to the Batman pattern, it'll set those. So I do that for a couple of the nano leaf ones. But you can also do !Govy in chat as well and get some information on how you can just set the Govy lights. So I changed the one up on the top to actually be a Govy RGB strip. Anyway, we hit 1,000 followers this week. So I was super stoked about that, super excited. And so we've been talking for the last week or two about doing some kind of giveaway and what could those prizes be. And we've had a handful of people kind of reach out and say, what about this? What about that? And we've had some really good ideas come out of that. And so I want to go find some of those things that we've been talking about. I just need to go find the correct browser window where I was collecting all of those. It was not that one. It was also not that one. Also not that one. Got way too many browser windows open here. Yes, it was part of this one. Cool. Let me move some of these tabs out, and then I will go. So we had folks recommend things like, what about a mechanical keyboard? So that was one option. So I was trying to keep it in like the $50 to $100 range, but I think we could be a little bit flexible on that. So we talked to, yeah, there's a TIE fighter back there. Lego kit, Lego for the win. So a couple of ideas that were presented. What about a mechanical keyboard? What about some IoT lights? Things along those lines. I think those are all great ideas. I'm not going to make like one giant bundle and like give away a ton of stuff, but I would like to do some kind of giveaway for 1,000 followers. That's a big milestone for me. I've been streaming for 1 year and 6 days. So I was really excited to hit the 1 year anniversary right around the time that we hit 1,000 followers. I think that was great. And so I want to do some kind of giveaway for that. This Sunday, I've got another guest on the stream. And so I'm thinking, oh shoot, I was going to do next Thursday. We'll do the giveaway, but I'm not streaming next Thursday. We might have to do like an off-schedule stream to do the 1,000 follower giveaway thing. And so I'm going to try to figure out how I'm going to do that. First, we need to decide on what that giveaway is going to be. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to have like a price point in mind, and I'm going to come up with like a couple of gifts around that price point. And whoever wins the giveaway can pick their prize. If they are domestic in the United States, I will ship them that prize. If you are outside of the United States, I will give you like a Visa gift card or something of that dollar amount. So either way, you'll get that value. But if you're outside of the States, sometimes like the technologies like IoT stuff, they won't ship internationally for reasons. So I'll come up with that price point, and then we'll do the giveaway, and I'll have like a number of prizes, and the winner will get to choose which prize, or we can like randomly select one of those prizes. We'll do something along those lines. And so I'll have to figure out like budget wise what we're going to do. And then we'll have to figure out when we're going to do this. So we've got, I'm actually waiting to hear confirmation from the guest on Sunday. If she doesn't confirm, we'll do the giveaway on Sunday, on the Sunday stream. If they do confirm, then we won't do the giveaway on that stream. I believe they are a product manager at Google, and I don't want to lose out on hearing their thoughts and perspectives on hiring and things like that, especially since we heard this week that Google now is also slowing down their hiring for the remainder of 2022. And so we may want to hear about like how can, if other groups are slowing down their hiring, engineering is still going to have a priority, but like how can people stand out as a candidate on those jobs if companies are starting to slow down on hiring? So we'll definitely take a look at some of that on Sunday if they confirm. If they don't confirm, we'll do the giveaway on Sunday. If they do confirm, I'm gonna have to figure out like what other day can we stream to do the giveaway, and so we'll figure that out kind of as we go. So I will know hopefully tomorrow or Saturday if that person's going to be on the stream on Sunday. And if, like I said, if they don't confirm, then we'll do the giveaway on Sunday. I'll make sure to tweet about it. So go follow me on the socials. I will tweet and post it on LinkedIn as well. So you can go see all of that information over here in chat. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all those platforms with the same username that I use here on Twitch. If you're watching this on YouTube later on, like and subscribe, by the way. Hope those resume reviews were helpful for folks. I'm going to split those up into individual videos, and we'll put those under the resume review playlist as well. Yeah, we'll figure out a time. So if I do have my guest on Sunday, then I'll figure out like some other evening slot where we can do that giveaway. Or we'll aim for like maybe sometime on Saturday, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to play that kind of by ear a little bit because I think I'm on somebody's podcast Saturday morning as well. So I need to figure out like what time I have available to do another short stream just to do the giveaway. But I do want to celebrate having so many of you around. And so we'll definitely like follow me on Twitter, follow me on LinkedIn. And I'll be sure to like send out when we're doing the giveaway, and you will need to be present to win because we're going to draw, because I need to know where you live and which prize you want. So if you're domestic, you get to choose the prize, and then, I need to know where you want it shipped and all that kind of stuff. But if you're outside of the country, then we'll figure out like, how do I get you like a Visa gift card or PayPal or something like that, or Venmo or something along those lines. So that's kind of what I'm thinking as far as the giveaway goes. Smogger says, thank you for donating your time to do these videos. I love doing this stuff. I love sharing perspective. And Tiffany is the first guest that I've had on the stream in a couple of months. And so it was really refreshing to have someone else on the stream to kind of share their thoughts and their input and their impact, for the kinds of management that they do. So I really appreciate her time. And we're going to be having a lot more guests. So pretty much every Sunday now is booked up into September. And we've also got most Thursday night slots also taken. And I've still got a giant list of people that want to be on the stream. And so I'm looking for other like engineering managers, HR people, recruiters, anything along those lines. If you've got some kind of involvement in interviewing or screening, anything like that, I would love to have you on the stream. But I'm also interested in having people who have recently gone through a job hunt that want to talk about their experience, especially with tech slowdowns and things like that. Like, what did you do to stand out to a company to get an interview? What made a big impact and so on. And so reach out to me on all those channels, or you can reach out to me on Polywork. I've actually got a kind of a standing thing on Polywork right now where I'm looking for people to be on the stream and so on. So you can find me over there, same username, Ian Douglas 736 over there. So yeah, go find me on all those platforms, and we'll kind of keep an eye on all of that. In the meantime, let's go see if Tiffany is up and streaming over on her channel yet. Yep, so she's up and running. So we're going to go right over into Tiffany's channel. So appreciate everybody that submitted in those resumes, and we'll get that raid set up here in just a minute. If you do have other questions, other things that you want to discuss as far as like career advice and interview prep and all that kind of stuff, definitely keep dropping those questions in here. You can also message me privately on any of these platforms that I just mentioned. You can send me private messages and I'll answer those wherever you ask. And then I'm happy to help people out with advice as much as possible. So cool. Well, let's go right over to Tiffany's channel. So hang out for the raid. We'll raid over there. Appreciate her time. So we want to definitely want to give her a big thank you by raiding over there, and make some noise in chat when we get over there. She's got some good topics that she's going to be talking about. So we'll catch you over on that channel, and we'll see you on Sunday, one way or another. And watch Twitter and LinkedIn for when I'm doing the giveaway. And we'll catch you next time. Cheers.